Martin Selmayr believes you made a stupid decision, and he says it is still legally possible for the UK to reverse the withdrawal from the European Union. If you voted Brexit, are you getting tired of this continual public condescension? If so, call me on 0345 6060 973. Perhaps you're a Remainer and you think he's right, and I know a lot of you still do think that. Then text me at 84850, or perhaps it's time for a truce, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch me on Facebook Live. We're coming from Brussels next.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here in Brussels in the European Parliament, where Bashing the Brits is about to be registered as the first ever national EU sport, because it's coming at us from all different directions, and the one today that has really hit us between the eyes are the comments from a man called Martin Selmayr. Who is he, you say? Well, he is one of the most powerful bureaucrats in the whole of Brussels. He spent the whole of his working life here. He is known as the Monster in the building called Berlaymont, which houses most of the 20,000 employees of the European Commission. He's been described in a variety of ways, poisonous, polarising, and a lovely quote here from a senior EU official, unnamed of course, who says, "It's only natural that once you're in power, you have enemies. The problem with Martin is that he has no friends. That means maybe he took it all a little bit too far." Now, he almost came to national prominence during the general election. Do you remember when Mrs May decided she'd invite that nice Mr Juncker for dinner in Downing Street? Gosh, I bet they had to get the corks out fairly quickly that evening. And it emerged the next day that Juncker had called the Prime Minister deluded in her view that the UK could get a rational and sensible trade deal. Now, I saw Juncker and I spoke to him face-to-face about a week after this news report emerged. In fact, I had a bit of a go at him in the European Parliament over it. He said, "Nigel, that was a disaster. That should never have happened." So who was there at that dinner? Well, David Davis was there, Theresa May was there, Michel Barnier and his deputy, Sabine Wayan, were there, and of course, Jean-Claude Juncker was there with Martin Selmayr. Now, this is not a court of law, and I can't prove that it was Selmayr that leaked that to the press, but Juncker made it pretty clear to me he did not want this to reach the light of day. So Selmayr says that we've made a stupid decision, but it is still legally possible for the UK to reverse our withdrawal from the Brussels bloc. And let me tell you something, he is not on his own. Every one of the top EU bureaucrats and officials have been saying all sorts of things about us over the course of just the last week. So, tell me something. If you voted Brexit, are you tired of this continual public condescension? If you are, I am, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Perhaps you think, and you're a Remainer, and you still are, maybe you think, oh, this Selmayr chap, he's got it about right. The Brexiteers are stupid. And I know a lot of you out there still do think that. Maybe Bob Geldof's listening, I don't know. But either way, text me on 84850. Or perhaps you think it's about time we had a blooming truce on this and simply got on with the result of the referendum, in which case, using the hashtag Farage and LBC, you can tweet at LBC, and of course you can watch me live on Facebook and comment on Facebook from here in Brussels. And our first caller of the evening is Will from Evesham. Will, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Interesting. I just listened to your comments there. You introduced the show, really. I mean, again, you kind of, you're spinning the propaganda, aren't you? I mean, there's been no Brit bashing. That's just the right-wing press is ever trying to turn things. What have you said? Brexit is stupid. Well, it's difficult to argue, really, isn't it? And what you...
No, I can argue that with you, Will.
Hang on, Nigel.
I think it's the boldest.
Can I just finish my sentence just before you interrupt? Is that okay? I thought this is a talk show, not a dominant show, yeah? So if I just
Oh, we are on our high horse this evening, aren't we, Will? Right, make your point. I will listen in total
I'm probably on the same horse as you, Nigel. What I would say is that during the referendum campaign, I don't remember you once mentioning actually it's going to cost between 50 and 100 billion to leave. But I do remember you standing in front of Red Bus saying, yeah, we're going to get a rebate of 350 million a week.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I never did that.
And then
I never did that.
Immediately, as soon as the vote was done,
I never did that, Will.
You were forced on television to actually admit it's complete rubbish. All right? So,
Well, I have to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you because you got your facts completely wrong and you're clearly very anxious to make your point. Well, if you make them, they need to be factual, Will. I never stood in front of any bus saying £350 million a week. I always thought it was a very silly claim and not one that I would ever have associated myself with. And furthermore, there isn't a divorce bill of 50 to 100 billion. It doesn't exist. It is a figment of Monsieur Barnier's imagination. We are not duty-bound, morally, legally, or in any other way to pay it.
It's rubbish, Nigel. I mean, I don't know whether you're deluded or whether you're just trying to make it up as you go along.
Oh, I'm deluded too. We're all deluded. So, okay, let's just get this right then, Will. So Martin Selmayr says that we're stupid. Martin Selmayr says we're stupid, right? And Mr. Juncker, it was leaked, says that we're deluded, and you agree with that. And Mr. Verhofstadt, who's the Parliament's chief negotiator, says that he deplores the UK's decision to leave the European Union. Antonio Tajani, who is the President of the European Parliament, said this week that we won't move a millimetre. Gosh, that's negotiation for you, isn't it? But I think, Will, top of the pops is Monsieur Barnier, who said at the weekend there are extremely serious consequences of leaving the single market and it hasn't been explained to the British people. We intend to teach people what leaving the single market means. It is threats, it is bullying.
350 million into the NHS every week.
Oh dear. Will, I'm sorry. I never ever do this, Will, but I'm afraid if you're not prepared to listen or admit you got it wrong, then we are actually wasting our time. You're welcome to call this show again, Will. Check your facts first. Thank you. I'm going to Ron on the Isle of Sheppey. Ron, are you stupid, Ron?
Oh, far from it, Nigel. Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I spoke to you once before. That other gauge was just...
I remember. And in fact, last night we had all first-time callers on the show. You've been on once before. Will from Evesham, that's the second or third time he's come on, and he can't get his facts straight. Now Ron, we've got the entire hierarchy of the European Union this week condemning us, talking down to us, really telling us that we should just reverse what we've done. Are you getting a bit sick and tired of this?
I am getting absolutely sick and tired of it, and the only reason they're doing it is because they need the UK money, don't they, to keep their gravy train going. It's quite obvious. Everybody must know that now. In fact, I've had a very interesting conversation, email conversation, with my local MP over this. I don't know if you want me to mention his name or...
Well, I know who he is. Yeah, but go on, say it.
Gordon Henderson.
Yep,
and I actually voted for him. Though I was going to vote UKIP, I didn't actually have a candidate. So it was a choice between Lib Dems, Labour, and the Tories. So it was a sort of a choice between the sort of Dandy and the Beano and the Financial Times, really, wasn't it? So I did vote for him. You know what I mean? I did vote for him, and I said to him, I'm very upset in my email. This transitional period that's come out, he's backsliding. And he sent me one back saying, no, by March 19 we will be out of the single market, we'll be out of the customs union, we will be out of the EU. That's what the people voted for. And then he turned around and said, this transitional period is probably good for however long it goes on for.
Well, they're speaking... They're speaking with forked out, and I mean Gordon Henderson is one of the strong Eurosceptic MPs, and he's happy to accept transition. But Ron, I was thinking less tonight about process and more about the language, because it seems to me that those that can't reconcile themselves with the result of Brexit simply seek to abuse those of us that thought it was they believe we've got it wrong. And it must be because we're thick, we're stupid, we don't wash as often as them or drive as nicer motor cars. Ron, I thank you, mate. I know you're absolutely a devoted Brexiteer. Ron on the other Sheppy, second call, getting angrier, I detect. Daniel in Manchester, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Second time caller again.
Are Brexiteers stupid? Sorry,
No,
you're a
not
first-timer,
stupid.
are you?
No, second time call.
Second time
So,
call, right. Go on.
no,
Tell me, Daniel. Tell me, Daniel.
Brexit voters aren't stupid, not at all. But I think they made a misinformed decision because of the lies told by yourself and the Leave campaign.
Oh, Daniel, you're another one. No, listen, this is fine. I tell you what, you tell me one lie that I told in the campaign, and I will immediately hold my hands up and apologise to everyone watching this show on Facebook Live. So how did I lie, Daniel?
Well, where's Turkey in the EU right now? Turkey aren't in the EU, but we were told by the Leave campaign that Turkey would be getting the red carpet rolled out to them. But as we've seen from Angela Merkel in the week, that's a no-go.
Yes, they've been rolling out the red carpet to Turkey in terms of giving some of your money, Daniel, to them for year after year after year. Billions and billions of pounds have been given to Turkey as sweeteners, much of it in what's known as pre-accession aid, and the aim has always been to get Turkey in the European Union. What they're beginning to clock is that a lot of people voted Brexit because they did not want a country that was 98% in Europe to join the so-called European Union, and Merkel, I think, fighting off against Schulz, realises after her, I think, perhaps the worst foreign policy decision made by any Western leader in modern times, and I think Merkel realises that to say she wants Turkey to join now would be electoral suicide. So there's no lie told there, Daniel, is there? Come on, throw another one at me.
Turkey goes completely against the principles of the EU, though. We've seen what they're doing to journalists, though. But anyway, moving on.
Well, look at Romania, look at Bulgaria. They were hardly, they'd hardly transitioned to being modern Western democracies, had they?
Well, no, they've not. But they are being, they are getting a bit of they're getting their wrist slapped at the moment over some of the policies that they're taking up. But I mean,
Daniel, listen, Daniel. You called me a liar, and I want to know how I've lied.
Well, I'm talking about you and the entire Leave campaign. I mean, you had stuff like.
No, Daniel, please. You said the lies that you told, and I'm waiting. I want to hear one lie that I told. I've got plenty of time.
Well, we've talked about the how many laws apparently the EU impose on the UK. We've heard figures like 60 to 70% that has come from UK.
Maybe, yeah, it may be higher than that.
That's not. It's lower than that. That is not the case at all.
Daniel, I think you're struggling to make me out as a liar. I thank you very much for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:15. So EU boss Jean-Claude Juncker's right-hand man, a guy called Martin Selmayr, says we are stupid for voting for Brexit, and that adds to Juncker saying Mrs May is deluded if she thinks we're going to get a free trade deal. Mr Verhofstadt from the European Parliament deploring our vote in the referendum. The President of the European Parliament, Mr Tajani, saying he won't move a millimetre in these negotiations. And just to top the lot, Monsieur Barnier, the charming Frenchman who's leading negotiations on behalf of the European Union, telling us we intend to teach people what leaving the single market really means. Do you remember I called them thugs and gangsters the other week? That, to me, is how they're behaving. Look, they may not like our decision, but it was a democratic decision. And I think the fact the European Union can't cope with it shows you they themselves, frankly, have no respect for democracy. Now, one British MEP seems to rather agree with the EU bosses. His name is Charles Tannock. He's been an MEP for the Conservative Party for London since 1999. And he has applied for an Irish passport because of his disgust over Brexit. He says he is ashamed to be British in many ways. Now, I rang up Charles Tannock before the show and I invited him on, and he wanted to clarify that particular statement by making clear that he now thinks that actually he's ashamed of the way that Britain has treated EU citizens. But either way, he is angry. He is really condemnatory of his own political party, its voters. And he said, I love being British, I love being Irish, I love being European, and see no contradiction between all three. I wonder what voters in London think of Mr. Tannock being quoted as saying he's ashamed to be British and applying for an Irish passport. So, there are people out there who think that Brexit was a huge, historic and stupid mistake. And I really want to hear from you on 0345 60 60 973, and I will always listen to all counter-arguments. What I can't listen to are people coming on, being factually inaccurate and repeating it time and again. It's pointless. John in Dartford says to me, when we joined this superstate, we were conned, but we never had a chance to change our minds. We had to accept their laws. Marilyn in Canterbury says, the Remainers are the stupid, deluded ones, as your caller Will just demonstrated. Poor dears, be kind. We are leaving, and they are panicking. And Shirley on text says, we had a vote. We voted out. I'm sick of bad losers and insulting comments from EU leaders. No transition period. They've had long enough to get organised for us leaving. Let's get on with it. Well, we know where Shirley stands. Martin in Fulham, who is a first-time caller. Good evening, Martin.
Hello, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
Not one little bit.
I have to confess that I'm sick, I'm deluded, and I'm pretty stupid.
Do you wash often, Martin, or not? I mean, are you in the unwashed category as well?
I don't think so. I think I shower quite regularly.
So, Martin, you are a Leave voter, are you?
No, I'm not a Leave voter.
You're not a Leave voter?
Very hard. No, I struggled very hard before I made a decision, which was to remain. But this is the thing. I run a business. It's a curtain fabric business. Been doing it for about the last 50 years. Since the vote, we get a new price list from our suppliers every few days, every week, every couple of weeks, with price increases, because you probably know we lost our textile industry a long time ago. So everything that we sell is imported, maybe from the Far East or from Europe. So our prices are going up. We absorb as much of that as we can, but you probably also know that life isn't easy for high street retailers. So we have to pass it on. So we pass on the price increases. Of course, that makes things more difficult because people have a limited amount that they can spend on curtains, and it's having an effect on our business, a serious effect. I'm going on holiday in a few days, and I'll be lucky to get €1 to £1. And
that's because you're being ripped off, Martin. That's because you are being ripped off, okay?
The reality.
These companies at the airports. Well, you're being ripped off. But Martin, if you think, as somebody importing fabric and selling curtains, if you think that Brexit has caused the fall of sterling, what were you saying in 2014, Martin? What were you saying in 2015? In fact, sterling has been falling since 2010.
Can I finish my point? You haven't let me finish.
Yeah.
I've admitted to being deluded, sick and stupid because I can't see how I'm better off. I can't see how I'm better off now. I can't see how I'm going to be better off next year or the year after. Please tell me the error of my ways.
Martin, the point about... Well, that's a separate argument, isn't it? That's the big debate about Brexit, the benefits or otherwise. The point about sterling that you make is a point that you could have made every single year since 2010, when sterling really started to fall, and it started to fall sharply in 2014. You know, sterling was trading at 134, 135 to a dollar. In February of 2016, it's 130 now, all right? So that needs to be got into perspective. The arguments, Martin, on Brexit are that we free ourselves from a bureaucratic club, we make laws that are appropriate for our industries, and we're able to reach out and do tariff-free business with a bigger, broader world. Martin, I thank you for your call, but I've got to get onto the point here. You know, we are being abused by a whole load of EU leaders and told we're pretty blooming stupid. Have we had enough of being condescended to like this, or do they have a point? Jim in Romford, another new caller. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. You're one man I'd love to shake his hand again and again and again for your awakening of how ridiculous Europe has been. And you're right, we are being condescended, and we've been condescended down to for many, many years. I once myself worked for government where we were working on insurance for laws to be wrote into European policy, 22 points in law. 18 were rejected by the 18 member states at the time. completely carte blanche against us. I mean, we wrote the modern rule book on insurance, but it's just an example of how Europe has been dictating and steamrolling over us for many years, as if Britain's opinion has never, ever counted. And we must...
Do you know, Jim, one of the arguments, Jim, that used to be put was that Britain, being a big, strong country, had huge influence at the centre of European policy-making. And I think one of the killer facts in that referendum was that the last 50 times the British government, both Labour and Conservative governments, had been to the Council of Ministers to say, look, this piece of law is bad news for Britain. Can we do something about it? We lost on all 50 occasions, Jim.
It's not just bad news for Britain, it's bad news for Europe. And yet Europe, these people that are completely self-governed and completely in their self-righteousness believe that Britain has tried to rock the boat and unsettle it. That's why we're being patronised. They're frightened of what Britain can go and do. If Britain goes off and makes a success of this, which we will in time, we have no choice because we have to survive, and we do as a nation time and time again, they know that is the consequence of us pulling out of Europe, and that's why they're throwing as much mud, stones, sticks, as much as they like. But as Brits as we are, we'll take the sticks and the mud and the stones and we'll come out the other side.
Yeah, well, Jim, I believe that.
We'll see the light at the end of the tunnel in time. It's going to take time. But no
Jim,
more...
I believe that, and I thank you, Jim. Lots of it. Adam says, why did anyone vote leave when clearly we had no idea of the consequences? It was impossible to make an informed decision, go around making decisions without the relevant information. And yes, you are stupid. What if we voted to stay in, Adam? What legislation could they have brought upon us? It was uncertain what our future would be had we voted to stay in. And I'm going to go now to James in West Hampstead, another new caller. James, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. So what about this war of words? I mean, is it reasonable that we should be talked down to by EU officials like this, James?
Well, so my question for you is, do you think that there is any possibility that they may have it right?
Well, they've got the euro wrong. They've got the migrant crisis wrong. They've actually spawned new political movements on the far right and the far left all over Europe. No, James, I genuinely believe, and I'm with the previous caller on this, I genuinely believe that the European project, as is bad not just for Britain, but for the whole of Europe too.
Listen, I guess the point is that everybody knows that you genuinely believe that.
Yes.
Clearly, there are good reasons to leave the European Union. There are good reasons to stay. It's not black or white. It is a balance. I think the thing though that is unquestionable is that over the last 30-odd years, Britain has enjoyed unprecedented growth and
no, we had much higher. No, James, we had much higher growth in the 1950s and the 1960s than we did ever before we joined the common market.
Well, listen, the 1950s, you're talking about a post-war period, so you're talking about from a very, very low period. But I think that the standard of living of everybody living in Britain has improved dramatically whilst we've been living in Europe.
Well, certainly, James, the standard of living would have improved whether we were in the common market or not. The point is, we can argue economics, James, until the cows come home. The big thing about Brexit was we voted to take back control of our country, its laws and its borders, so that we would be, through the ballot box, via a democracy, the masters of our own destiny for good or bad. That, James, was the point. And I just think that it's wrong for these European bosses to line up and abuse us for making that decision.
Well, listen, I guess they're entitled to their opinion. And by the way, you've also abused them. I mean, we've seen you standing up in the European Parliament being condescending to your European colleagues. And I guess
Do you know what, James? In the case of the unelected ones, you're right, and it's a fair cop. And I thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels. It's now 7:30. Brit bashing here in Brussels is about to become a registered EU sport, as every single one of them lines up to say we're wrong, we're deluded, we're stupid, we've made a deplorable decision, and they won't budge a millimetre in the negotiations, and we're going to be taught a jolly good lesson about what life outside the single market means. And meanwhile, back in the House of Commons, David Davis is reporting to the House of Commons on how the third round of our negotiations went in Brussels. And he says that no final Brexit bill will be agreed until the eve of our departure in 2019. So this is the British government strategy. They won't agree any individual part of the renegotiation. They want to draw all the strings together to agree a complete package. Clearly, he sees no prospect of that happening until right at the end of this process, and we're talking now about moving towards the end of March 2019. And there is, of course, a very big danger in all of this. The danger is whatever gets agreed, the European Parliament could simply veto the whole thing. So we could have gone through, 9 months of waiting for Brexit to be triggered, 2 years of Article 50 negotiations, and we could find ourselves at the end of this no better off than we were. I have a feeling that British public opinion, particularly for those of us who are stupid enough and deluded enough to have voted for Brexit, I can't see us waiting until right at the end of this process, patiently. I think we're going to want to know some more facts. I think in many ways we're going to want to know why we're being asked to pay any exit fee at all, given that under the treaties we're not obliged to, and we of course have that 9 billion sterling investment in the European Investment Bank. So back to the callers. Do you think it's right and fair and reasonable for us to be condescended to in this way by Juncker, his staff, in fact, here in Brussels, Uncle Tom Cobley and all are being rude about the Brits? Leanne in Bishop Stortford, another new caller. Good evening, Leanne.
Good evening, Mr. Farage.
Good evening.
I don't know where to start, to be honest with you, because you have got the upper hand, seeing as you're continually talking about this subject. So I shall start with, yes, I do think people are misinformed. We seem to be going on all the time about, including yourself, about manufacturing. Financial services never really seem to get a mention by most of the callers that phone in, and that is already having an impact. I have a friend who heads up a Brexit team for a major bank in London, and they have already taken £7 billion worth of business to Paris. So if you think that leaving the single market isn't going to have an effect, I don't know where you're coming from with that. It's not clearly any coming out of the single market will have an effect on the exports of German cars, but we're talking about a lot bigger than that in the City of London. So what have you got to say about our loss of financial services?
Do you know what, Leanne? I spent 20 years working in that industry. My father was in that industry. My grandfather was in that industry. And my son is in that industry. Our family have spent a lot of time in commodities, financial services, stocks and shares, you name it. In many ways, it's in the blood. And I found it distressing to see 25% of our hedge fund industry leave London directly as a result of EU regulations that came in after the credit crunch of 2008. Some of them gone to Zurich, some of them have gone to Singapore and will never be seen again.
Yes,
I find it distressing.
We need to have those regulations in order to operate within Europe.
We need, Leanne. Hang on, Leanne. We need to have appropriate regulation. Of course we need regulation. We need appropriate regulation. And the real point, Leanne, is this.
Just on that point, Ben, okay, because now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. Who is going to make... So you're quite prepared, as along with other things, to cherry-pick the European Court of Justice for the bits that you actually want, but it's not good enough for anything else. So you want
Leanne,
things that you want, but you won't accept the ECJ for the other things.
No, I won't accept them for anything. Not for anything. Right. I don't want foreign courts having financial services. You've raised this point. It's Britain's biggest industry, and it isn't just the City of London. It's people working. It's people working in Cardiff. Do you think, Leanne, the British government? Do you think the British government, mandated by the British people, should be in charge of Britain's biggest industry? or an unelected group of people in Brussels and Luxembourg and elsewhere.
Nigel, can you cut that, please? Because that
the European Commission are all unelected, Leanne, and every... Leanne, listen.
They're not directly elected, the same as Theresa May hasn't been elected by us. So I think you're spinning that line again, the same as... Just to change the subject, but you said, what lies have you told?
Leanne,
you said about the £350 million...
Leanne, oh no, please, don't go down that route. Leanne, well, you've got to get your facts right, Leanne.
What you do say is £55 million a day. That's what you said towards the EU membership. You didn't say the £350 million towards the NHS. What you clearly said was, we pay £55 million a day to be an EU member, and that is not true. You've doubled the figure. So what you do is you very cleverly spin
I spent the whole of the referendum campaign, Leanne, saying we pay £30 million a day. Now let's get back to something substantive.
You said 55 million. And also you're very clever as well. It's not particularly suggesting, oh, Norway, yes, what's wrong with Norway? There's nothing wrong with Norway. They're a very rich country. I've seen so many clips of you, Nigel, saying that. And then when it comes down
I tell you what, let's get one factual thing straight, shall we? Let's get one factual thing straight. The sole source of legislation in the European Union that governs financial services is proposed by the unelected European Commission. Not a single one of the 28,000 of them can be voted for or can be removed by the electorate. And they have the sole ability to make laws that affect Britain's biggest industry. And Leanne, whether we get it right or whether we get it wrong, I think we as a country should be in charge of our biggest industry. Leanne getting very upset there and accusing me of using a 350 million a week figure. I never did, ever do it. Trevor in Alston in Cumbria, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Yeah, it's very nice to speak to you. Now,
so Trevor, were you a Leave voter, Trevor, or a Remain voter?
I was a Leave voter.
Right. So does that mean you're stupid, Trevor?
What? I'm certainly not stupid. I'm very disappointed in you, Nigel, actually.
Oh, go on.
I joined UKIP, you see, and then you left. And when you left, I left. And I'm never going to vote again. But
well, Trevor.
I think people should listen to Mr. Juncker and all the other people that are insulting us right now in Europe, and realise that if we end up going back into Europe, we know exactly how they're going to treat us.
Well, we would certainly, if we were to try and overturn the referendum result and try and reapply, I suspect they'd treat us terribly. Trevor, all I can say is, given these comments from all the main leaders of the European institutions and the way they're behaving towards us, Trevor, all I can say is thank goodness we voted to leave. And Trevor, you know, I haven't walked away. I'm still in UKIP. I'm still leading them in the European Parliament. I'm not leading the National Party, but it did take 25 years of my life, so I'm not going to feel too guilty about that. Thank you. Another first-time caller. Philip on text says, how dare the UK vote to leave the European Union? They are tearing their hair out, trying to work out how to make us have another referendum and to get the answer right this time. They don't believe in democracy. Well, I agree with that. Julian Redbridge says, yes, of course, people who voted leave are stupid. Who on earth votes for something with no idea of what will happen? It makes no sense. No, Julie, voting to remain made no sense either, because you couldn't predict what would happen as members. In fact, you can't predict anything in the future with certainty. The point about Brexit was, you know, the nation may be like a boat being chucked about on the ocean of the global economy and global affairs. The question is, whose hand is on the tiller? And the decision for Brexit is that we should make those decisions. Kate from Sandgate says, you have a lot to answer for, Mr. Farage. If we are not stupid, we certainly look it. Leaving our biggest market with no assurance we will have tariff-free trade is nothing but stupid. Kate, do you know something? 85% of the world's GDP is outside the Eurozone. And that figure grows by 1 percentage point every single year. And with much of that global economy, we have no trade deals in place at all. I'd rather we had a tariff-free deal, but look, business is not made by governments. Business is not made by Juncker and the crew at the European Commission. Business is made because consumers are prepared to pay the price for a good. That is how the world works. And you know something, Kate? We are the biggest market for buying goods from the Eurozone. We are a very good customer. And in the end, we're going to sort this all out, even if they try and obstruct us in the short term. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:45. Well, one thing I can say for certain, 14 months on from Brexit, is the passions are about as strong as they were back on June the 23rd last year. And there are many of you who think that those of us that led the Brexit campaign did so badly, dishonestly, and I think they do actually think we are pretty stupid too. Others, of course, who are outraged at this lineup of leaders from the European Union, most of whom, of course, are unelected, telling us what we should and should not do. Joe on Facebook says, how dare they call us stupid? From listening to David Davis today, the Brits are the only ones who seem to want to have a genuine negotiation, not a dictatorship. Norma says, take back our laws. No one took our laws, you liar. We were all lied to. You're a disgrace, Farage. You did nothing to inform the British public you wanted Brexit, no matter what the circumstances. Well, in some ways, Norma, you're right, because I believe in independence. I believe in democracy. I believe in the nation state. But I'll tell you what the biggest lie was, Norma. The biggest lie was nearly 50 years ago, with the politicians lining up and saying to my parents' generation, you're just joining a common market. It's just going to be for trade. Don't worry, your little heads, it'll all be fine. In fact, Norma, the whole thing was based on the most gigantic lie. And Steve says, I rather like this. I would much rather be stupid than a bully. The history books will not look well on the European Parliament if they continue throwing barbs. Luckily, we're very unlikely to be the last country to leave. So, passion's strong. And we're going to County Down in Northern Ireland to speak to Henry. Henry, am I stupid? Are you stupid? I mean, are we all stupid?
Well, Nigel, I've been called stupid today by the former Minister of State for Europe, Peter Hain, who has suggested that the Northern Irish are mad for not coming out on the streets to object to Brexit. And it's really clear to us over here now that the European Union is actually trying to weaponise the border issue. Whenever over the last period of time we've built up really good relations on the island of Ireland and between the UK and the Republic of Ireland, it just seems crazy what they're doing now. And, you know, the European Union seem to want to get the Republic to leave Schengen, to just to try and make things as difficult for us as they possibly can. And, you know,
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, by the way, I had Peter Hain on the show. I interviewed him on Sunday. It was my first Sunday show. Because I had him on because he was a former Minister of Europe, but also, of course, Northern Ireland too. And I'm very struck, Henry, that everybody in the north wants the border with the Republic of Ireland to be as friction-free as possible. And everybody in the south wants the border with the United Kingdom through Northern Ireland to be as friction-free as possible. But Mr. Barnier seems to want to have a border because he said we have to have customs posts with countries outside the customs union. And if they were serious, Henry, about wanting a frictionless border, they of course would say we will have tariff-free trade between us, and that will sort everything out. But I mean, where will in the end the Republic go on this, in your opinion?
Well, the Republic's under enormous pressure from the European Union, and you know it's pretty clear that the Republic is part of the sideshow for Europe that they're just inclined to use to try and make things difficult for Brexit. But the people in the Republic of Ireland definitely want to retain the common travel area that we've had for millennia. They want to have a frictionless trade there.
Well, you say millennia, Henry. I think since 1922, wasn't it? But it's still a very long time.
Well, it's up to the Republic, or it's up to the European Union to offer the Republic some form of dispensation, rather than expect the UK to, to try and accommodate Brussels in this. It really is outrageous. And the more they go on like that, I think the more determined people are in Northern Ireland to make a success of Brexit, even though there was a small majority against leaving the European Union. I think if the vote was
on the day,
we would win it.
Yeah. Henry, I thank you for your call and for making the point about just how good relations are between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, which is a very good thing. And we're staying in Northern Ireland. We're going to Andy in Derry, who is a first-time caller. Andy, good evening.
Are you looking, Nigel, two Irish people in one show? No, Nigel, I just wanted to say I voted Remain. However, the referendum went with the Leave campaign. I fully accept the people's decision of England and Wales to leave Europe. That's nothing I can do about that now. But I will say that when the referendum was announced, my heart sunk to my stomach. The first thing that I thought about was the border.
Yes.
I don't know, Henry's from Newry, so Henry's again is quite close to the border with the Republic. I actually live on the border. If you come out my front door and turn left here in the north of Ireland, if you come out my front door and turn right here in the Republic. Now my big worry is that if I want to
I think, Andy, that's called having a real vested interest in this subject. Absolutely. But Andy, look, I mean, honestly, what I like about people like you is that you recognise it was a democratic decision and we should get on with it. And I just want to reassure you, that everybody in the north and all the businesses in the south all want to have a friction-free border. And the best way to absolutely guarantee it is to have no customs.
I just can't see how it's going to happen. I just don't, again, as I was saying, on a daily basis, just from living where I live, I'm on the border, and then I work as a lorry driver, so I cross that border anywhere between 2 and 10 times a day.
Yeah.
And again, my big fear is people keep saying about a technology-heavy border, but is Michel Barnier really going to want to leave the one true border between the UK and the rest of Europe wide open with technology? Because, let's face it, technology, it doesn't have the same... Technology can't pick up on suspicious people. But
Andy, if we have a grown-up, tariff-free deal between us and the European Union, you'll have no problem. Andy, I thank you. Fascinating call. Someone living literally on the border. John in Wales says, "Hi, Nigel. The message you read out about free trade. I wish people would understand we don't have a free trade deal with the EU. It costs billions in membership fees. Who are the really stupid ones?" I get the point. You're absolutely right. Billy says, "I dare you to read this out. I don't know you. Brexit is not going to happen. Vote Labour." Well, Billy, if you don't want Brexit to happen, Sir Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, has been very much on your side in the House of Commons today, because Labour are going to oppose the Great Repeal Bill. Labour are, I think, going to do their very best to try and prevent real Brexit from happening, which I think for many millions of people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn, believing him on this issue and many others to be a principled man, is a very disappointing moment. And my last caller of the evening is Anthony in Watford. Anthony, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Are we being condescended to, Anthony?
No, well, I've got some praise and I've got some criticism for you, Nigel. This is the third time I've had the pleasure of talking to you. I'm a staunch Remainer. I've tried my damnedest over the last 3-4 months to listen to the arguments and say, perhaps I'm wrong. Nigel, what have you done to this country? Can you look me straight in the face and say, I've done nothing to this country?
If you're on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook Live, I'm doing it right now, Anthony, but go on, yeah.
3 things. I gave my daughters £100 sterling the other week to go to Spain. She came back with 98 euros. There's a chap who phones one of the programmes one night, LBC. He's got a factory in Brighton. He's taken a factory to Spain, just out of Seville, a purpose-built factory. He went to his local MPs. They didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to help the man. He's taken 185 of his employees and their dependents. 450 people are going to Spain.
Anthony, we're running out of time, Anthony. We're running out of time, Anthony. I'm sorry. I understand your point that sterling is lower than it was at the time of the Brexit referendum. But Anthony, and I keep making this point, and I will go on making this point. In fact, what we need to do, I think, I'm looking at my producer, we need to get some sterling charts, I think, up on the LBC website for people to understand that sterling started falling quite sharply back in 2010. That decline accelerated after 2014. Yes, sterling is lower after Brexit, but the really big falls happened before. And I'm sorry to lose Anthony, who I know takes it seriously. Look, all I can say is, the way these people are behaving, thank goodness we're leaving. They're bad people. They don't respect democracy. They don't respect the nation state. We need to man up, sort this out, and get out, frankly, I'm beginning to think, as quickly as possible. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC, live from Brussels. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7 in London. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. Now, we were going to talk in the next hour about David Davis and what he had to say. He went to Parliament